Thank you, folks. As the credits roll. Let there be light. Please welcome back the filmmakers, the director of the film, Thor, and Lena, the producer of the film, Thor Klein.
Thank you.
And you have one more special guest.
Yeah, we would love to have Rebecca up front here. Granddaughter of Stan and Françoise Ulam and daughter of Claire, of course. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you for this wonderful film. Let me start by asking, how did this start? Where did this come from?
Well, it started a long time ago. When I was about 13 years old, I found this book in the library in my hometown in the southwestern part of Germany, close to the French border. And it was called Who's Got Einstein's Office? And it was more or less the story of the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. And in this book, there was also a chapter about Stan and Johnny. And they were driving fancy cars and throwing parties. And I thought, this is great, I want to become a mathematician myself. Because they were obviously so much more exciting than the boring math teachers I had in school. But at the same time, I wasn't really good in math. But I thought maybe I'm just a late riser. I thought that until I was about 16 years old. And then I was sitting next to a guy in class who was clearly talented. And for me, it was quite traumatic because I realized I'm just not a mathematician. At the same time, I had a fantastic literature teacher, and he made me aware of the fact that I might have been more interested in the stories of these people and their ideas rather than doing the math myself. And that was a great relief, and so I kept reading about them all these years. And of course, while growing older, I realized that beyond the cars and the parties, there was deep, deep tragedy. And when I was in film school, I came across Stan's book. And it had, at the center of it, it had this beautiful friendship between Stan and Johnny. And so I talked to Lena and asked her whether she thought it would be possible to option the book. And then I guess she took over.
Yeah, I optioned it. And it took us, so I optioned it in 2015, kind of in fall 2015 from UC Press. And since then, we've been researching and developing the film. And we shot the film in fall 2018, finished it in 19, had our world premiere in Palm Springs in January 2020, just before the pandemic hit. And then nothing happened for a year. But now we're here.
And Rebecca, let me bring you into this. When you see the film, how does it affect you? How does it relate to the stories you've heard, I guess, on a more personal level?
I mean, I've been hearing about the making of this film from my parents for years now. As I was telling these guys just now, you know, the family story has been part of my consciousness since I was a little girl. So my grandfather passed away when I was 7. I remember him vividly until that point. He and Meme, as I called her, Françoise, were living in Santa Fe, which is where I grew up. And I spent a tremendous amount of time in their house. And he would play memory games, not unlike the solitaire that he used to develop the Monte Carlo method, with me when I was a little girl, and was just fascinated by watching a young child's brain develop. So that relationship, which really ended quite prematurely for me, became a fixation, and I spent a lot of time in college writing and thinking about this history. And so I was so delighted when my mom told me that this movie was being made, and she was so excited to go to the filming. I really wanted to go to the premiere, but I couldn't. And then my mother unexpectedly passed away in December, so a huge rupture in our family, and it makes this movie so much more significant personally. It's a fantastic film. I'm delighted that you all have chosen to take up this story, but it allows this sort of continuation of a legacy that felt in danger of rupture. rupture and obsolescence. So it means a tremendous amount intellectually, but also personally. And I'm just so grateful that you all put it together so beautifully.
Sorry. What are you hoping for an audience? Why is it important to tell this story now? Why is this story relevant to us today? History, there's a lot of history. Why is it important where is its importance to us today, in your perspective?
I mean, while researching this topic, I also realized how many layers it has. That, of course, on the surface you have the moral. Almost everybody knows this famous Oppenheimer quote, and the moral dilemma of it. But when you look beyond that, you see that it's immensely complicated in the sense that the moral question gets so layered. For example, to understand why they went to Los Alamos in the first place was quite easy for me, because they were immigrants and they really in these days also needed a job in order to stay in the US. It was not so easy. Even though nowadays we think of these people as these incredible geniuses, but they had a hard time, a lot of them, to be able to stay. And also, you know, Hitler, I mean, there was the more than the rumor that Hitler is also working on the bomb, so that was a clear thing. But later, to continue to do that, this is where things started to get complicated, in a sense that you have to know that they, as immigrants and with the loss they experienced, they had only each other. It was really literally, their friendships became so intense because nobody else was left. And at the same time, they were on the verge of discovering all these new technologies. Not only the bomb, it was also the computer, and I think we are these days in a similar situation to a degree, because we have these new technologies arriving, and we could not yet fully comprehend what it means to have them. We most likely, like these guys back then, we will only comprehend it once it has happened. And I think it's good to be aware of these things. Also, we see today with all the social technologies and the companies that we struggle to get an idea what this all means. And I think that resembles a lot what these guys were dealing with back then. Also, I find, speaking about the nuclear topic, I find it almost a bit ironic that back in the days it was about who builds the biggest bomb. Today it's more about who builds the smallest bomb, which is really it's quite a ironic thing.
I think also, I think we're experiencing today globally a real referendum on science, on the ethics of science and what we do with information and how we use technology. And this is a very important reminder of a moment in time when all of those issues were crystallized in a way that they really hadn't been to that point, and may not have been since. And the ethical dilemma that was confronting these scientists wasn't necessarily, am I on the side of good or evil, but this drive that I've spent my entire life, career, and identity pursuing, who's going to achieve it first? And do I obey the call of science, or perhaps my conscience, which is conflicted? And my grandfather, and you all, I think, do a really good job of pulling this out, like many of his colleagues, felt very compelled to follow science where it led, and believed very firmly, almost evangelically, in the power of science, which I think is a lesson that the world needs to remember these days, the power of science.
If only we completely understood it. I'm going to ask one more question, because I want to give opportunity for the audience to ask questions and make you a part of this conversation. So just to share a little bit, and there's so much more to discuss on this film, but where is this film going? Where can people find out about the film?
Yeah, so So far, the film has, I think, played more than 30 festivals worldwide, or I think now it's over 40 festivals because a lot has happened in the last weeks. It has sold to over 20 territories. So right now, since last Friday, October 1st, it is actually in the US and Canada in selected theaters and on demand. So of course, you should try and watch it on a big screen like tomorrow here again. But then if someone misses it or is not here in New York, they can just go online and buy it as well. At the same time, it's playing in Brazil in theaters right now. It's been released in Taiwan and Poland. In December, it's going to be theatrically released in France. And later this year, I think also Italy and Russia. And then next year in Germany. So it's doing quite a big journey around the globe, which we're super happy about.
And I want to say that it really, I mean, the playability level of it, it plays so beautifully and really tells such a story that I think that, you know, as you see, universally, people will connect to it.
Thank you.
We'd love to take some questions from the audience. I see a hand up right here. We'll give you a microphone.
On a different level, did the brothers ever reconcile?
Maybe that's a good question for Rebecca to answer.
Yes, no, they did. They did reconcile, and you know, I spent time with Adam. He became a very prominent Sovietologist and wrote a number of books about Stalin and Lenin and the history of the Soviet Union. And he was a professor also at Harvard. And my husband, who had to leave, and I would go over to his apartment when we were in college, and he would make us martinis and pierogi, and we would talk. And he has two sons who are here in the New York area as well. So yes, that's a good news story out of the movie.
We have a question up here up front.
First, thanks to all of you for being with us. And Rebecca, can you say something about your work as it involves science and how that started for you?
I work. Sorry, I work in the counterterrorism arena, so slightly different for the NYPD, but still national security related, and I think probably that's why it's been an interest for me for my whole life. And so it took a slightly different turn, but same kind of general principle of trying to protect us all.
Were there other members of your family who became scientists, mathematicians then? Was that a...
I'm trying to think. No, we have such a small family, and alas, I'm afraid that all of the mathematical and scientific impulses were contained in my grandfather, and none of it really translated down generations that I'm aware of. But maybe our children's generation will have some of that. One can only hope.
And what's next for you guys? What have you been working on since you made this film?
You want to tell, Lena?
Yeah, so we are actually working on a new big project based on a historical figure. This time it's also based on a book. So this film was based on Adventures of a Mathematician by Stan Ulam, but actually Françoise really wrote it, I would say, just to kind of let the secret out here. And so the next one is based on a novel called Leonora by Elena Poniatowska. She's a very famous Mexican writer, and we're going to tell the story of one of the key female surrealist painters, Leonora Carrington, and her life and the people she was involved with. Big love story, of course, with Max Ernst. Today we have the granddaughter of Max Ernst, Amy, with us as well. So it's a big honor to have two granddaughters of our basically projects with us. So we're gonna shoot in Mexico as well for this project, and and this one, maybe to spoil some more secrets, Adventures of a Mathematician we basically rebuilt the US in Europe. So 90% of the film has been shot in Germany and Poland. And maybe you want to spoil the Los Alamos secret.
Yeah, we ironically we shot Los Alamos on a former Russian airfield in East Germany, which also was more or less secret back in the days, and it played for the most secret facility that the US had. In general, I went to a lot of archives here in the US, which I also was really grateful for. I think there are some amazing places like the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, and also the Library of Congress, where I could read a lot of the letters that Johnny and Edward exchanged, also referencing Stan in a lot of times, because as it's seen in the film, they also had really there was also tension in these relationships between Edward and Stan and a few others. So I went to a lot of archives. I've also looked for a lot of photos, and then we had to rebuild it in Germany, and we literally went to Los Alamos a couple of times and took pictures of especially for me from the directorial point of view. I was quite worried about the light, because the light is very special in New Mexico, which has to do with the color of the soil, like it reflects the light. And so in order to match all these sequences with each other, I had to make sure that we have the same condition in Germany. And of course we were also lucky because the weather you obviously cannot plan, and it really played in our favor that we had sunshine everywhere. So
I assumed you shot it here, so a great job in the production.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think there was a question.
There's a question there.
Somewhere.
We'll give you a mic.
Asking a second question, did your grandfather discuss what he did in his mathematical life and all of that?
He did. Can you hear me still? Yes. He did, and as Lena mentioned, so my grandmother was his scribe, and after he died, she understood a lot about what he was doing. At the time, the wives, as you all convey in the film, did have a good understanding of a lot of what was going on, not necessarily all of it. But then once he died, she took to it as her sort of life's work to memorialize him, his life, and his projects. So Monte Carlo, Project Orion, obviously the work on the hydrogen bomb, and so that became a huge part of her sense of creating legacy, and he spoke to her extensively about it. My mother, interestingly, less so. She and I had fewer conversations about it than I did with my grandmother, and I think my grandmother was very conflicted about the nuclear work, much more interested in some of the other pursuits. But my mother didn't take it up with as much attention as my grandmother and even I did.
No, there we go. I want to thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for such a beautiful film.
Thank you for having us.
You'll be back tomorrow
Thank you
night?
so much.
Sure.
Yes. So tomorrow night, tell your friends. The show will be here. It's going to be another beautiful night. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us here, and we hope to see you at more films soon. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.